Saying, all right. Tell me, recording in progress. Okay. Yeah. I'd just like to say thanks for having me tonight to do this talk about the geology of Mull. I've lived in Mull for quite a number of years now. My wife is from Mull. She's Mull born and bred. I first visited Mull in 1979 as an undergraduate from St Andrews. And I've been back and forth to the place ever since then. As I said, lived here for the past 23 years now. And I did a part-time master's at Glasgow a few years ago on the geology of Southwest Mull. So I've spent most of my free time, most of my waking hours thinking and doing something with the geology of Mull. And tonight, I just want to give you an introduction, just a fairly gentle, easy introduction about why the geology of Mull is so good, what's worth looking for, and a list of places that are worth visiting just to be able to appreciate the geology. So it's not too technical, it's fairly straightforward. And if there's got any questions, then you can hit me with them at the end. So it's a PowerPoint presentation, so we'll just get this going now. Okay, it's called Mull Rocks. Why is Mull geology special? And that's today. So points I want to cover in this talk is what reading material there is available on Mull's geology that you can look at yourself. I want to do a very, very brief go through the research history, who the main researchers have been over the years. When we look at Mull in relation to other places that are similar to it round about, we'll have a very brief overview of the geology before we get into the specifics, where I shall be looking at particular sites, particular locations, and we can, just be able to see what there is to look at in terms of geology, all the exciting locations. But first, some of the resources, the material. What I've got here is a list of mainly books, pamphlets, and things that are quite useful to have if you're interested in the geology. If we start on the left-hand side here, we've got this one called the Paleogene Volcanic Districts. Now, Paleogene is just a fancy word for tertiary. It used to be called the Tertiary Volcanic Districts. They now call it the Paleogene. The geologists love changing the names. But that's a very good book. It doesn't just cover Mull, it covers Rum, Egg, Skye, Arran, all the other places on the west coast that are similar to Mull. And it's very, very thorough. It's if you're really interested in getting into the detail, that's a great book to go to. The next one along is the Mull, Iona and Ardnamurchan landscapes in stone. This is just a recent publication, this one, fairly recent, and it's very, very good. Covers more than just Mull, it covers Ardnamurchan as well. And it's really nice. The diagrams and pictures and that are great. Next to that, on the right, we've got the Tertiary Igneous Geology of Isle of Mull. This was a little excursion guide put together by the Geologists Association, and this goes back to 1969. It's still cited a lot in references. I mean, it's used, you'll see this mentioned all over the place. It was quite a groundbreaking little book in its day, although it's way out of date now. We've also got Mull in the Making by Ros Jones. This is a great little book. It's published some time ago and still being published, you can still buy it. It gives a really good overview of Mull. We've got the Ross of Mull geological map there, which is worth getting a hold of. The maps are all available to look at online from the BGS website. So the British Geological Survey website has got all the maps available to look at online if you need to. In the bottom left here, we've got the Memoir of the Geological Survey. Now, this is an amazing piece of work. This is when the survey officers were here in the early part of the 20th century, they did an incredible piece of work to put this memoir together. It really is quite astounding. It reads like a doctoral thesis, that thing. It really is thorough. It's not light reading, but it's very, very thorough. And then we've got the main Mull geological map here. That's the one we'll see in a little while. It's quite impressive. There's a book there written by the late Joan Faithfull about the granite quarries. If you're interested in how the geology has been applied and how rock has been used in different places, that's a great little read. There's also this one called Mull and Iona, a landscape fashioned by geology. It was SNH that published this, first of all. It's no longer produced as a book, but you can download it as a PDF file from their website. So that's pretty good. There's some very good stuff in there. nice clear diagrams, and you'll see some of them tonight because I've used some of them in this talk. There's an excursion guide to the Moines Rocks. That's the ancient metamorphic rocks in the southwest of Mull, produced by Edinburgh Geological Society. That's a great little book if you're interested in that particular part of Mull's geology. And this thing here lying on its side is the other main geological map, the one that covers Staffa and Ulva and the west coast of Mull. So again, these are all available as downloads. The maps are all available as downloads from the BGS website. So talking about research, the earliest research was probably John McCulloch, that the famous fossil tree is named after. He did a lot of early work in Mull and the rest of Scotland. The Duke of Argyll himself was a bit of a geologist. He's credited with describing the famous leaves that were found in the leaf beds at Artun in Mull, these fossil leaves. He's a bit of an amateur geologist in his day. The main body of research, as I mentioned earlier, was the survey officers in the early part of the 20th century who put together the memoir and the map. And the chief amongst them was Edward Bailey, who was I'm not going to talk too much about Bailey here. He was quite an eccentric, but he did thorough field geologist. I mean, the work he did was quite remarkable. When we get up to the 1960s, people like Ray Skellhorn, who was the main guy behind that little excursion guide that I showed you, they did a lot of fairly groundbreaking work in the 60s. And since then, there's been all sorts of research from universities, from PhD students and other researchers doing work. And there's quite a body of work on Mull geology since the 60s. If you go to Google Scholar and you can just hunt a topic down, you'll find it. There's a lot. So there is the Geological Map of Scotland, and Mull is over on the west side here, about halfway up. All these red splodges that you see across the Central Highlands here, those are granite, and the Ross of Mull granite, which is this little rump here, is part of all that. We'll cover that later. This is setting Mull in the context of the other volcanic islands and locations up the west coast. You've got Skye, you've got Rum, Ardnamurchan in here, Mull, Arran, you've got Antrim. You've also got St Kilda. You've even got Rock all the way out here. These places were all volcanically active about 60 million years ago. And we'll be looking at this in a bit of detail later. So it's Mull as part of what's called the British Paleogene Volcanic District. And it's one of the key members of that province. This is what Mull looks like from the air. That's a satellite image from Google. The one from Bing is better. The Bing map shows you it quite well. You've got the Sound of Mull. It's an island separated from the mainland. That's Morvern over here. That's the Sound of Lismore. This is Lorne here, the Firth of Lorne. That's Iona down here, and the Treshnish Islands out here. And that's the island of Coll up in the top left there. So that's what Mull looks like from the air. And we're going to be looking at just all over the place, rocks all over the island. Sometimes you'll get features, geological features on the satellite image, and I'm going to be looking at this later. This white band that you see stretching across here is called the Loch Ring Dike, and that's actually visible from space. Now, a lot of the geology of Mull looks impressive on the map, but it's quite subtle on the ground, and it can be quite hard to actually see. But this thing here, the Loch Ring Dike, is actually visible from above. It's such a notable feature, and I'll be looking at that later in the talk. Here is the main geological map of Mull, the one that I always joke to people looks like an explosion in a paint factory. It's a serious bit of work. Although when you break it down, it's actually not as complicated as it looks. You've got this seriously complex area in the middle, but round about the edges, round about all that pink stuff that you see, is basalt lavas that cover most of the island. So you've got this complicated bit in the middle, but round about the edges, it's a lot simpler. This is a much simplified geological map of Mull and Morvern. And just to point out some of the things, that's the complicated bit in the middle, which I'll be looking at briefly. The green stuff on here is the basalt lava, so using green rather than pink. This yellow and orange stuff that you see around the edges at Greeben and at, down by Benesson, Karczyk, and around the Lagan Peninsula, Craigmuir. These are the underlying older rocks. Okay, that's sort of peeping out underneath. This red thing is the Ross of Mull granite, which we'll talk about. And Iona, which is kind of different and much older, is over here in the west. So when you actually break it down using this map, it's actually a lot simpler. So a very brief overview of the geology. The oldest rocks, as I mentioned there, are in Iona. They're mainly of Lucian gneiss, although there's also some rocks that were thought to be Toradonian in age, but that's been discounted now. You've got Moines Metamorphic Rock, places like Greben and Dallinish. These are the main basement rocks, and they probably extend all the way under Mull. If you have to drill down at any point, you'd probably find the Moines Metamorphics. You've got the Ross of Mull granite down in the bottom southwest corner. And on top of the Moines rocks, you've got rocks of Mesozoic age. So that's Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. Think of the dinosaurs, think of the ammonites. That's the rocks we're talking about there. And then the main body of rock over the top, the main thing that you see in Mull is the Paleogene or the Tertiary Igneous, lavas in the central complex and dikes and sills and all sorts of good stuff. And that was the last sort of major event, if you like, about 60 million years ago. Since then, we've just had erosion, glaciation, and the normal weathering processes to give the landscape that we see today. So there's the map again. I mentioned the Ross of Mull granite is this red thing down here. The brown stuff is the Moines rocks, which is underneath, and you've got the Mesozoic, Jurassic, Triassic, Cretaceous peeping out round the edge. Also up at Tobermory, there's a bit of it here. So we'll visit all these places and see all these rocks. So the main subjects I want to look at are Iona. Look at Iona to begin with. We'll have a look at the Ross of Mull granite, the Moines Metamorphics. We'll have a look at the Mesozoic rocks, the Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, and the Paleogene lavas of the Staffa lava formation. That's possibly the most exciting igneous rocks in Mull, I would think. They're certainly the most spectacular looking. You've then got what are called the plateau lavas, and there's what's called the central intrusive complex. That's the tricky, wild-looking bit in the middle. The whole thing is punctuated by dikes and sills and plugs and all sorts of minor intrusions, all sorts of funny things going on. We'll have a look at the glacial features, the more recent processes that have affected geology and given us the landscape that we see today. And I'll have a look at the coastal geomorphology, some of the landforms, some of the features you'll find along the coast, because the coast of Mull is really quite exciting. There's some tremendous places to visit and explore. There's, you'll meet no one, but you'll find some great rocks, some great features, and some great geology. So, if we move on, have a look at Iona to begin with. It's very different from Mull. It's mainly Lucian and what used to be called Toradonian. It's much older than Mull. It's about over 2,000 million years old. It's the most southerly exposure of the Lucian gneiss, which you find in Lewis, Harris, Western Isles, Uist, Tiree, and Coll. Iona is the most southern exposure of it. It's famous for its marble quarry, what's called the Macher, the grass-covered sand on the west side, and its beaches. I mean, Iona's beaches are just fantastic. It's poorly researched, but it's getting better. I mean, it's compared to Mull, there's not nearly so much been done in Iona. I think mainly because it is so difficult to interpret and to understand. So let's look at the map and some photos. This is the Ross of Mull here, this bit sticking out. That's the Ross of Mull granite. You've got Finifert in here. And this is Iona over to the west, over here. There's a bigger map, and you can see it's just amazingly complex. All these colors that you see here, these are all different rock types in Iona. The marble quarry is right down the bottom here. Columbus Bay is in about here. So it's a seriously complex picture that you've got. And there's also a neat little group of islands to the west of Iona called Rail and Staffavic. And these are much younger. The rocks there are tertiary in age, so they're a bit of an oddball. So that's Iona, quite a complex looking thing. We'll show some pictures now of what the place actually looks like. This is the view from Finifert on a nice day looking over to Iona. You've got the Ross of Mull granite round here, and you've got these older rocks forming Iona. That point there is Dún E, that's the highest point of Iona, which we'll see the view from in a little while. And as you walk across the road across Iona down the east side, you'll come across things like this. This is a glacial erratic. That's a big lump of Ross of Mull granite that's been transported by ice. And it now sits on top of these older, much older rocks that used to be thought of as Toradonian. This is just there at the side of the road. It's quite easy to find. And this is what these so-called Toradonian rocks look like. They look nothing like the rocks in Glen Torridon, but they are sediments. They're siltstones, sandstones, what have you. They're, you know, the bedding is almost vertical. And this cleft that you see here is because of what's called a dike, a much later igneous dike running through there that's been weathered out. And here's sort of another close-up of the rocks, hammer for scale. You can see the sort of honeycomb weathering, the sort of holes in the rock. That's just caused by the weathering of the sandstone. That's a fairly fine sandstone there. And it's got that very distinctive pattern to it. If we head over to the west side, this is the Macher, where the golf course is. Golf course and sheep. Windblown sand. This is recent stuff. Now what you've got here is a landscape that was formed very, very recently by sand blown by the wind and then grass growing on it. And it's sitting on some of the oldest rocks in Europe. So you've got this juxtaposition of very, very new geology and incredibly old geology. It's quite thought-provoking, I think. This is the beach on the west side of Iona, just glorious. The pebbles on Iona are just fantastic. I think they're the best anywhere. I'm maybe being a bit partisan when I say that, but yeah, they're definitely good. And you've got oddballs like this, just not far from this beach. You've got this syenite, as it's called. It's like a granite without quartz. And these black splodges that you see in it are a mineral called clinopyroxene. And these are huge. These are huge crystals of clinopyroxene in amongst feldspar. And this is a really, really unusual rock. You don't find this sort of stuff every day. But there's also some oddballs like this in Iona, which has never been researched. Nobody really knows much about it. It's just there on the shore. You go a bit further north, you've got this place called Port Ban, the white port, the white bay, where the sand is shell sand is beautiful white color. And you'll see there's some very red rocks over on the right-hand side here. These are much later igneous rocks that have been intruded into the older rocks. And they look like this when you get up close. It's not just the red stuff, you've also got some very dark material as well. So what you've got is a rock of granitic composition, this red stuff, and you've also got this black basaltic looking material. It's what's called a composite intrusion. So there's two completely different types of igneous material injected at the same time. And there's a bit of interplay between the two. So fascinating rocks. And, you know, these colors give the pebbles the appearance they've got. And speaking of pebbles, you've got this sort of thing. You know, these are just glorious. That green color that you see isn't the famous precious serpentine that you find in Iona. That's a mineral called epidote. It's more of a pistachio green. And there's a lot of that in Iona. I see a lot of these boulders look like this. They look great when they're wet. When they've dried out, they're not quite so impressive. And this is one of the great features on the west side of Iona. This is the Spouting Cave over on the left here, having a good spout. Now, this picture was taken by George Washington Wilson in Victorian times. So this is a very early photo of the Spouting Cave. And the Spouting Cave is just a cave with a blowhole at the back of it. And when the waves come in, when the tide and the weather is just right, you get this great spout of water coming out. So that's a great old picture, that one. Also in the southwest of Iona, you've got this little hill, and there's another granite erratic just sitting there. Just another big boulder of the Ross of Mull granite brought by ice and just dumped on the hill slope. If we move a little bit further south from there, you get this Isle of Mull, which is just offshore. Again, beautiful little bay there with pebbles. And Isle of Mull has got pink marble running through it. There's a seam of pink marble. I've never been out to it. It's always been one of these places I'd like to get to. It's not far offshore, but you would need a boat to get out to it. So yeah, there's all sorts of little things like that that are waiting to be discovered. Pebble Beach, anyone? This is the beach at Columbus Bay. I mean, just look at that. That's just glorious. So if you come on the Pebble Beach walk, we'll be able to look at this stuff and you can ask me questions about this and we'll do things with them. And there you go. That is the famous Iona marble and the precious serpentine that is found in association with it, the so-called Iona pebbles. They're a very distinctive sort of shade of greenish yellow. It's quite different from that epidote we saw earlier. And that's at Columbus Bay. Somebody's built a labyrinth out of pebbles there. We'll see that as well. And again, just round for Columbus Bay, you've got these red and black composite intrusions cutting through the rock. So this is the ancient Lucian gneiss. You can see the banding in it there. And you've got this thing cutting through it. Top bit is granitic, the black stuff is basaltic. And as I said, it's a bit of interplay between the two. So the colors are just amazing. The rock types are just fascinating in Iona. And there's a vein of epidote cutting across some classic Lucian gneiss. That's about as typical of Iona as you could find. Where it's been washed by the waves, it looks a lot better. When you've got the bare rock or the lichen-covered rock inland, it doesn't look quite so good. But on the shore, the rocks look good. And here's a heart for you. This is a boulder of Ross of Mull granite that has been carried over by ice, another erratic, brought over to Iona. And it's got this heart-shaped inclusion in it. This is a type of rock called diorite, which is also found in amongst the Ross of Mull granite. And this one just happens to be heart-shaped, this lump of it. So that's a wee thing I always post on Valentine's Day. This is the famous marble quarry with my friend Joyce sitting in it. And that brown thing near the front is the dog that she had at the time, called Nipper. Yeah, great big white blocks of marble just lying there. You can see some of the machinery in the background there. Here's some of the machinery. Some of it's been covered in special paint to try and preserve it. That's a gas engine and it's in remarkably good condition. But there's a lot of stuff that the equipment is. I mean, it's a great industrial archaeology site as well as a geological one. All this equipment is just sitting there from the days when they mined quarried the marble and sent it away to all over the place. That's a picture taken from the Scran website. There's lots of good stuff on Scran. It's worth a look. Some sort of shed and a crane-like arrangement there. Not sure what the date of that is, but it just shows you how the quarry would have looked at one time. This is a view from the quarry looking out, and I mean the colour of the sea. That is this classic Iona, and it looks quite benign there, but it can be pretty wild at times. And that's the Ross of Mull in the distance that you see there. And boulders of cut marble in the foreground. If we stick to the east coast of Iona and we go north of the slipway, again, more erratics of Ross of Mull granite sitting on the older, what was thought to be Toradonian rocks. You've got this thing here. And you've got this oddball. It's called the ringing stone. And this is a lump of a rock called Cantallonite. Now, you don't find Cantallonite in Mull. You find it in the Strontian complex, so it's probably come from there. And it's called the ringing stone because if you hit it, it makes a metallic ringing sound. And you'll notice that in the middle of it there's a little round hollow with a small boulder in it that's been thoughtfully provided to give you something to hit the stone with to make the ringing sound. And it really is quite a remarkable thing. But there's no Cantallonite in Mull as far as I know. So this must have been carried by ice quite a distance. One of these great little enigmas in Iona, of which there are a lot. That's the beaches at the north end. Just beautiful place just to go on a nice summer's day. And you can't go to Iona without getting a sunset. You've got to have a sunset. It's got to be experienced. And the best place to go and catch all these views is the highest point called Dún E. It looks like Dun 1, but it's pronounced Dún E. This is all nice round about here. That's Mull in the background with tertiary lavas. And this is the Ross of Mull granite that you see over here. So that's Iona. There's a lot to see there. There's a lot that's not understood. There's a lot that could still be researched. But it's just a fascinating place to look at the geology. Very, very different from Mull. Okay, I'm going to look at the Ross of Mull granite now. I know we're moving through geological time with this, and this is slightly a sequence, but if you were to go from Iona over to Mull, you'd hit the Ross of Mull granite first before you hit the older rocks. So we'll have a quick look at the Ross of Mull granite. It's in southwest Mull. It's one of the Caledonian granites, the same as you find in Aberdeen, Ranachmoor, Glencoe, Glenetiv, these places. It's the same, basically part of the same suite of rocks. It's beautifully exposed and it's easy to see. And this is the great thing about it. And I think this is one of the reasons it's been very well researched. It's just so easy to get to. And there's lots of it to see. It's not all hidden by trees and cover, what have you. It's very distinctive. It's a nice pink granite, but there's a darker mineral called biotite, a type of mica in it. And the black biotite has given it a slightly darker pink appearance. And it takes a beautiful polish. So it's been used all over the world. I mean, it's just everywhere. The quarries are well documented. That book that I mentioned earlier by Joan Faithful has lots of good information about the quarries. So if we look at the map, there it is there, that reddish, orangish looking thing towards the south. Now, although it's on the southwest of Mull here, it actually extends offshore quite a distance. And in fact, it even goes across to Iona. These little islands off the east side of Iona are Ross of Mull granite. So it actually covers a much bigger area than you see there. I mentioned earlier on that there was a type of rock called diorite found in amongst the granite. That's what this purple stuff is that you see down about here. That's the diorite. It's a much darker rock. This is the beach at Finnefort with the famous split boulder, and the pink granite looks really distinctive, especially when the sun's shining on it. It's very distinctive. And if you just go south of Finnefort a bit, you can see the textures in the rock. These cracks that you see are called joints, and it's got a very distinctive jointing pattern. It almost looks like it's dipping in towards the sea. It's very distinctive sort of appearance to it. Also, just south of Finnefort, that's Iona in the distance there. You can see the pink granite has got this darker grey material cutting through it. Now, these are sheets of another type of rock, a more basic igneous rock, more basaltic in appearance, which has been intruded into the granite when the granite was still not quite solidified. And you've got this fingers of the black material in amongst the pink, and you've got fingers of the pink in amongst the black. It's quite a complex picture there. And that's just south of the slipway. It's quite easy to get to. And there's the famous split boulder on the shore at Finnefort. It's worth a visit just to have a look at it. It was split by human hands. There's holes in the top where you see it's been drilled and then split. Near Tormore Quarry, which is one of the main quarries, you get a good view over to Iona, and we can see the pink granite there. That's looking over to Ban, the island of the women, where Columba supposedly banished the women from the Iona. Don't ask me why. They did these things in those days. You got the pink granite, very, very, I mean, the sun's just catching it nicely there. It looks great. This is in the quarry. This is the quarry. I mean, they extracted some rock from it just recently, not that long ago, but it hasn't been worked properly for a while. Steps going down there. And there's this nice bit where you can see the rock's been stacked up either side there to form a sort of road down to the slipway. So there's other places to see the Ross of Mull granite. I mean, the quarry at Finnefort at Tormore is probably the best one, because you're seeing a bit of the archaeology, the industrial archaeology, as well as the actual geology. But in Knockvollican, Erid, Camas, Fijian campsite area, Bendoran Cottage, Ardalanish, and of course the erratics over in Iona, is other places you can see it. Got a map here. These stars indicate good locations to go to see the Ross of Mull granite. We move on to the Metamorphic Rocks now. Now, the best places to see them are at Greeben and McKinnon's Cave area, the Wilderness Coast, which is quite hard to get to, it's a fair old effort, down at Ardalanish and Ushkin, which is fairly straightforward, and at Skur, which is just along from there. So we look at the map first. So we're talking about this brown material here. These are the oldest rocks in Mull. So down towards the wilderness, and this is Greeben here, and this is Benesson area, and Ardalanish, Ushkin, and Skur are all on this south coast. So see some pictures of this lot. I mean, there's other places where this crops out as well, but these are the two main areas. These are the Moines Metamorphic Rocks near Greeben. They form these slabs of what's called quartzite or samite, if you like. And when they're dry, they're okay, but when they're wet, they're really, really slippy. Got a very distinctive pattern to it. And it looks like this near McKinnon's Cave. You can see the dip on the rocks, about 40 degrees, and it's relentless stuff, this, if you're walking across it. If it's dry, it's okay. If it's wet, it's a different story entirely. And you can see the this material here, this rough looking material, is actually the Triassic conglomerates that are above the metamorphic rocks. And that's I mean, that's not in situ, that's all stuff that's collapsed and landed on the beach from the cliffs above. It's a very dynamic environment. Also at Greeben, we've got the famous unconformity. You've got these dipping metamorphic rocks, the Moines metamorphic rocks dipping here. And you've got these horizontal Triassic rocks over the top. So there's a huge time gap in between these two. And it's a classic example of an unconformity. Now, the most famous unconformity in Scotland is the one at Sicker Point, which I know is one of Angus's favourite places. And I probably grudgingly admit that it's probably a better unconformity than this one, but this runs at a close second. There's no doubt about that. And it's actually quite easy to get to as well. So if you're ever on a geological visit to Mull, you've got to see the Greeben unconformity. There's another picture of it. And in this picture, we've got the Moines metamorphics dipping there. We've got the Triassic conglomerates here. And in the background, we've got these tertiary or Paleogene volcanic rocks. So we've got the three main age groups of rocks that you can get in Mull. We can see them all in the one frame here. So it's quite nice that there's all that huge time span, and with these different main rock groups that are visible in the one picture. I mentioned Ardalanish. It's one of my favorite places in Mull. There's some great stuff to see at Ardalanish. It's I mean, all the geology groups that go to Mull go to Ardalanish. It's classic stuff. It's an SSSI, so no hammering or sampling allowed. Beautifully folded metamorphic rocks down there. Just wonderful patterns to see. And it's got the mineral kyanite. These blades, these crystal blades that you see there are the mineral kyanite, and it's famous for this. So that's a thing to look for. You've also got these nice big garnets. There's a type of rock called Garnet Amphibolite, which is a metamorphosed igneous rock. Most of the rocks in Ardalanish are metamorphosed sedimentary rocks, but there are some metamorphosed igneous rocks amongst them as well. And that's what we've got here. This is probably been a sill or a lava flow that's been altered by heat and pressure, and it's produced these great big garnets. I mean, some of these are about 2 centimeters across. None of them are of gem quality. None of them are even remotely, good looking, but it's interesting that they're there. And that's them again. Got my old faithful ruler for scale. You can see the size of some of these things. They're quite big. And it really stands out. It's very distinctive rock. It's black with these pink spots in it. Continue along the coast a bit from the rocks at Ardalanish as you move towards the Ross of Mull granite. What we've got here are great chunks of the Moines metamorphics in close conjunction with the pink granite. And the classic location there is here. And what we've got here is the pink stuff is the granite, and the grey material that you see, these are great slabs of the metamorphic rocks that have been broken off by the granite intruding into it. So as the granite has invaded the metamorphics, it's cut away, it's pulled away great big slabs of this stuff. And it's got this very distinctive appearance of slabs of the metamorphic rock in amongst the granite. It's been well studied, this location. It's a famous location, this one. It's just past Ardalanish farm. And if you want to look at some nice coastal scenery there, then the metamorphic rocks in this area produce some lovely scenery. You've got these headlands, these peninsulas and little bays that stick out into towards the southwest. And the Moines metamorphic rocks are almost vertical here. It's horrendous stuff to walk on, but it produces some beautiful scenery. That was some kayakers that were heading into the bay there. A lovely day that was last year. And if you go a bit further up to the east, this is near the limits of the metamorphic rocks near Sgurr. You've got these, again, almost vertical, mainly quartzites, sammites and things. And in the distance here, you've got, that's where Karczyk Arches is at that point there. That's Malcolm's Point. And these are the basaltic lavas that are on top of the Moines. So we're right at the edge of the Moines rocks here, the older metamorphic rocks. And that's just near Sgurr House. Okay, so the Mesozoic rocks, these are the Middle Age rocks, if you like. The Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, these are the The Mesozoic era is associated with reptiles. That's when reptiles were at their peak. The dinosaurs are, most famous for, this time. Dinosaur remains in Mull are, well, nothing really been found. I think anyone, anything of any note. No, there's no evidence really. Been found in Skye, been found in Egg. Mull may be next on the list for them to be found. There's certainly plenty of Jurassic rock that hasn't been explored. So there could be all sorts of good stuff here. So let's see where we can find these rocks. We'll look at the map again. Now, it's mainly the yellow stuff that you see. There's Inchkenneth, there's the shore at Greeben, Karczyk Bay, and round the Lagan Peninsula, and also at Craignure. There's also outcrops of this stuff up and down the coast towards Tobermory. There's a few outcrops of it, but the main ones are at Inchkenneth, Greeben, Karczyk, and Lagan and Craignure. So if we look at the Triassic, first of all, got the shore at Craignure near the old railway, the shore at Greeben, the famous unconformity, and also Inchkenneth. So let's have a look at those. We showed this earlier. These are Triassic conglomerates lying on the shore, fallen from above. That's near McKinnon's Cave. So it's really lumpy rock, and it's quite quite tricky stuff to walk on. That's a classic conglomerate. This is similar stuff that you get in Inchkenneth. This is on the west side of Inchkenneth, and you can see there's a natural arch in the rocks here. There's this little opening. So it's quite weathered. This is towards the south end of Inchkenneth where you see it well. And there's some really nice conglomerates there. It's a great island to visit, Inchkenneth. There's a lot of historical interest there as well. So just off the west side of Mull. And if you go to the shore at Craignure, this is very easy to get to because it's near where the old railway was. It's just south of just near the old pier, near the campsite. You've got this lovely conglomerate, Triassic conglomerate just sitting on the shore there. Very easy to recognize. The Jurassic rocks are again round the coast, underneath the lavas. Karczyk's probably the best place, I would say. It's good for finding fossils as well. The Lagan Peninsula and Craignure, and also North Mull near Tobermory, there's a few places. Look at the map again. So the Jurassic, again, it's round about here, Karczyk, Karczyk in particular, the Lagan Peninsula, and round about Craignure as well. We'll just have a look at a couple of places. These are Jurassic shales at Karczyk, and they're quite hard. They're quite indurated, as I say. I think it's because of all this sort of stuff going on. That's a sill, that's an igneous sill, that's an intrusion. That's hot molten material that's been intruded in there into the shales. I mean, this is one of the great things about Karczyk, is it's the best place in Mull to see a phenomenal variety of different geology. You've got sedimentary and you've got igneous geology coming together, and there's something around every corner. There's an amazing amount of stuff to see there. The only problem with Karczyk, well, there's two problems with Karczyk. The road down to it freaks people out because it's so steep. And when you get to Karczyk, there's quite limited parking at the pier. So if you ever go to Karczyk, be aware of that. It's probably worth going early in the morning rather than later. But it is quite tight at the pier for getting parked. But but there's a lot of great geology to see there. And in amongst the shales, you've got these nice big ammonite casts. There's no sign of the ammonite. That's where it's been. It's probably in some collection somewhere. But that just the compass there gives you an idea of the scale of that thing. So there's quite a few of these to be seen. You've also got these things, the Gryphea, the devil's toenails, as they're called, these fossil oysters in amongst the shales. Again, I mean, there's just loads of these things around. They're just everywhere. So it's a good indication of the marine environment that was there when this was deposited. I mentioned the Jurassic that you find around the Lagan Peninsula, and this is a piece of the geological map, of the BGS map. All this brown stuff that you see along here, up here, this is all Jurassic strata. There's quite a lot of it. It also happens to be in one of the most inaccessible, hard to get to remote parts of Mull. And it's a serious effort getting to this lot. The easiest way would be by boat, which I have been by boat, but we didn't actually land. It's really, you can go for a walk here and see no one all day quite easily. And it talks about, on the map, there's a note that describes a great cliff of lower Jurassic. And there it is there. This was taken from a boat trip I was on just a couple of months ago. And this stuff here, this striped looking material, these layers, that's all this sedimentary rock, all this Jurassic material lying underneath what's above. These are the volcanic rocks, the later tertiary volcanic rocks sitting on top. So it's an amazing place. I mean, the coastal scenery there is quite awesome, to say the least. I know that word's a cliche, but it's the only word to describe the coastal scenery there. It's really spectacular. So there's a great pile of Jurassic rock there, and it extends all the way around that coast. So there could be all sorts of goodies to be discovered in there. It's very poorly researched, and it'd be well worth spending some time exploring it. But like I said, it's a fair effort to get to. The Cretaceous isn't so well developed in Mull. There's a few places. There's a chalk, silicified chalk found at Greeben, and also at Karczyk, you've got the Cretaceous. Probably the most famous outcrop of Cretaceous rock in the area isn't so much in Mull, but in Morvern. There's a mine where they dig out sand, a very, very pure sand, and that sand is of Cretaceous age. The Cretaceous sand from Morvern that's of Cretaceous age, and that's probably the most important outcrop of Cretaceous rock in the area, although it's not actually in Mull itself. This is a picture taken from a paper that's published by Ian Williamson and Brian Bell, 2012. It was actually on the Staffa lava formation. This is a hill called Stronnenbosch near Karczyk, and you've got the volcanics up above, and you can see this where it says C. That is the Cretaceous rocks there in the cliff, and you've got Jurassic underneath. And I'll show you a picture of a close-up of this sort of stuff. There we are. All this stuff underneath these rocks here, these sandstones and things mainly, these are Jurassic. The Cretaceous is up much higher, closer to the columnar basalt that you see up above. And we'll be looking at columnar basalt in just a little while. That's a good place to see it at Karczyk. So the Cretaceous is up here somewhere, but as I said, it's not terribly well developed in Mull. You've got to really hunt for it. So I was talking about columnar basalt. The columnar basalt that's famous in places like Staffa and Ulva or Tun is part of what's called the Staffa lava formation. Excuse me. It's named after Staffa, obviously, where it's best developed. It's the earliest lavas of the Paleogene. So when we had all this volcanic activity happening about 60 million years ago, the first material to be extruded, the very first volcanic rocks, were the Staffa lava formation. It forms the lowest volcanics. The columnar structure is extremely well developed. It's quite spectacular. It's mainly in southwest Mull, like Staffa, Ulva, or Tun, Karczyk. You get in a few other places as well. There's a couple of places near Tobermory where you find it. There are also sediments between the lava flows. And what this tells us is that you would have got a lava flow, that columnar stuff, and then there would have been a period of time when there wasn't much happening, when you would have had plants growing and things, the rock weathering and breaking down and sedimentary layers being formed. And then you would have had another layer of lava on top of it. So the lava flows didn't form in quick succession. There was like gaps in between them. If we look at the map again, this map here shows the main outcrops of the columnar basalt. There's Staffa, that's the type location. There's Ulva there, a place called Arsjeruk, just round the coast from Ulva Ferry. That's the wilderness, and McCulloch's Tree is round there. Our Tun is here, Karczyk is there, and all the way along here, in fact, and east of Karczyk as well. There's also some of this stuff up in Tobermory, north of Tobermory, a place called Glachvor, which we'll see in a minute. So these are the main locations. When I was on that boat trip to Lagan a couple of months ago there, I noticed that along the shore here, there was what looked like columnar basalt as well. So that might well be another outcrop. I haven't seen this recorded anywhere. It's not mentioned in any literature, but I think that might be an outcrop over there. So that needs investigating at some point. So many things to investigate, just so little time to do it. Okay, here is Ulva, one of my favorite places. And this is the columnar basalt, the Staffa lava formation there. In the distance, we've got the cliffs of Greeben, and there's Ben More over there. So that's Ulva. It's another picture of it, the columns at Ulva. And we'll show you some humans for scale in just a minute. A couple of friends I was out there with. You see, giving you an idea of the scale of the columns. And again, it's if you want to explore the basalt columns of Ulva, my advice, pick a day when the tide is out, so you get to see so much more and you can walk around the side, and also pick a sunny day because it's well worth it. So that's the Staffa lava formation, the lowest lavas in Ulva. Just along the coast, I mentioned a place called Arsgerich. This is not far from where the fish farm is. That's the island of Eorsa over here. And there's Ben More with a bit of snow on it there. This was taken in the winter. That's Arsgerich here, and you can see the columns there. This is very, very similar to the stuff in Ulva. Very, very similar to it. And it extends around the coast here for a bit. So you can also see that at the Ulva ferry slipway, if you're waiting on the boat to go over to Ulva, you'll see the columnar basalt there, the Staffa lava formation. And there's Staffa itself, classic sort of view. You can see the regular columns here and the more irregular stuff on top. And underneath there is a bed of ash. It's volcanic ash underneath. Very often when you get a volcanic eruption, ash is the first thing to come out. And then you get the lava afterwards. So this ash would have been deposited first, then the lava's on top. And that's McKinnon's, I think it's at McKinnon's cave or the boat cave, I'm not sure, there's lots of caves in Ulva, in Staffa rather. And that's the famous Fingal's cave there. So you'll notice that these lavas are on a tilt. There's a bit of a, there's a bit of a slope on this here. There's a good reason for that, and we'll cover that later. Again, there's another picture of Staffa on a sunny day. Got the columns there and the ash underneath. There's the little island just off the coast of Staffa called Ambuachil, the herdsman. And the columns there are crazy shaped. They're all over the place. The columns aren't always vertical. Sometimes they're curved. Sometimes they've got funny angles. If we go along towards the fossil tree at Ardmeanach, you'll see this strange thing on the shore. It looks like a rose or a daisy of basalt columns. So it's radial basalt columns. And this is reckoned to be the cast of a tree. There was a tree growing up there that was overwhelmed by lava. The tree has gone completely, but you can see the impression that it made and the columns round about it. There is, of course, another famous tree near there. This is me, not far from it, Columnar Basalt. You'll see the way you've got the vertical cracks and the joints. You've also got the horizontal ones that look like, it looks like a pile of nuts. It's like, metal nuts stacked up. This is the famous fossil tree, McCulloch's tree, or that's the remains of it at the bottom here. That's the cast of it. And this was a film crew doing a program about it. This was for Gaelic TV. We were talking about the fossil tree. So it's an interesting day. It's a long hike to get to it. We were able to take a Hilux as far as Tavul, which shortened the distance considerably. But if you're walking from the main car park to here, it's a whole day there and back, really. So it's spectacular scenery all the way. And you've got these great columns of basalt all around the place. This is at Artun, on the other side of the Loch Screedon from where the fossil tree is. And again, the scenery there, the basalt scenery is just spectacular. You've got these great columns and you've got this fantastic cave. Again, this is a place that's best visited when the tide is out. You see so much more. And it's really spectacular. This is the famous Karczyk Arches along the south coast of Mull. Again, just spectacular scenery. So just another picture of it from the other side. And if you go east of Karczyk, east of the pier, again, you've got the same formation, these same columnar basalt rocks. And you're actually looking up into the underside of them here. And I mentioned a place called Glachvor near Tobermory. It's just north of Tobermory. You've got these columns. It's not nearly as spectacular as the stuff in the southwest, but it's columnar just the same. Quite neat. So the Staffa lava formation is the lowest lava flows, if you like. On top of those, you've got what's called the plateau lavas, the Mull plateau group. And these form that distinctive, what's called trap topography, where it looks like terracing. And that feature is best seen in the north and west. And Ardmeanach is probably the place where you see it best. So let's look at some pictures. This is looking across from Benesson to Ardmeanach. And this part of Ardmeanach gets called Berg. And just a word of warning, it's simply Berg. It's not the Berg. Okay, you see that repeatedly, but it's not the Berg. It's simply Berg, the name of the place. And there's a better view of it. You can see the terracing, the layers. These are all individual lava flows that you're seeing there. And here's another picture of it. This is taken from the SNH book. And you can see there's a fault running through there. There's been a bit of displacement on the rocks. So that it gives a very, very distinctive layering feature to the landscape. Even in the north of Mull, this is near Calgary, we've got this layered landscape. That's Benbuie above Calgary Bay. A solitary figure on the beach there. This is Bainata above Loch na Keil, taken in winter. And again, you can see the light can sometimes bring this out. So can the snow. The snow is sometimes very good at bringing out the layering and the lavas. This is near Achnadrish, looking over to the hill called Sarsdebown. Again, you can see the layering quite pronounced. And this is an enlargement of a picture that I took in winter, looking over Ulva Ferry towards the hills of Ardmeanach. And it's, it's like striped, it's like these striped licorice sweets that you get, this black and white appearance because of the snow. The snow really does pick this lot out. It's quite distinctive, individual layers. So you've got the lavas. Now the lavas were intruded by this wild looking bit in the middle of the map, what they call the central intrusive complex. It's mainly the rock types of grabbro and granite, plus you've got things called cone sheets and ring dikes and all sorts of stuff going on. This complicated looking stuff in the middle has caused folding of the lavas, the Mull Plateau group. Now I mentioned that, what do you call it, Staffa looked like it was tilted, and that's because of this. When this lot was intruded into the middle, it distorted the lavas around the edge. It's immensely complex, this stuff, and I'm not going to go into any great detail. I'm just going to look at one aspect of it that's world famous, a thing called the Loch Ba ring dike. It's easy to get to. This is the complicated stuff in the middle, and the Loch Ba ring dike is round here. It goes round there, round that bit there, and that's Loch Ba there. On the map, it's this stuff in about here, okay? As I said, it's complex, simple around the edge, complicated in the middle. This is a picture from MLS and Bell's book showing you the two main calderas. This is where the volcano has been and collapsed. And the Loch Ba ring dike is caused by the collapse of the final volcano in Mull. That's the ring dike, this yellow orange thing that goes round in a circle. That's a funny shaped circle. There's a better diagram of it from the original survey memoir, from the survey memoir. You can see it here up to Benangor and along up to Enforsa. It goes round in it's not a complete dike, there's breaks in it, but yeah. And the reason that you get this sort of thing happening is because basically the volcano collapses as the magma chamber underneath empties. The thing can't sustain the weight of the material that's above, and you get a subsiding block falling down in the middle. There's a really good illustration of this in one of those SNH books, this one here. This shows you the block in the middle coming down and the ring dike being pushed up the outside. So that what you've got, as I said, I showed this earlier, it's visible from a satellite image. You can see this ring-shaped structure on the ground. And what it looks like, the rock itself is quite light colored. It's not particularly dark, although it's got dark chunks in amongst it. But this is what it looks like on the ground. You've got this great wall of light colored rock. That's looking up the ring dike. And this is looking down it towards Loch Ba. Now, it's only really on the southwest side of Loch Ba that it's as spectacular as this. As you move further around the ring dike, it's not nearly so impressive. But above Loch Ba, it's a seriously impressive looking thing. And it's got a columnar structure as well. It's not just the basalts that do this, you've got things like this. So it's been well researched, it's been well looked at. It's one of these things that's world famous. It was described at the time as being the best example, the most perfect example of a ring dike known to science by the authors of the memoir. So they were quite carried away with it. And it's certainly one of the, if you're serious about understanding the geology of Mull, the Loch ring dike is a definite must for a visit. This is what it looks like, forming that skyline there. And you'll see there's a little chasm in it here. And this is, again, that's that chasm. And what that is that's a late dike that has cut across the ring dike and it's weathered out. It's just completely eroded out to give you the steep-sided chasm. So it's quite an impressive place and easy to get to. It's a bit of a hike up the hill, but it's not difficult. So talking of dikes, there's a thing called the Mull dike swarm, and you can't go to Mull to look at the geology without coming across dikes. They're all over Mull, mainly northwest, southeast. There's a phenomenal concentration in some areas, such as Croghan and Loch Nakeal, and they extend onto the mainland, and they go quite a distance on the mainland. They're shown as the map as quite thick lines, but I mean, a lot of them are actually quite thin, and you know, they don't scale well on the map. They're easiest to see on the coasts and the riverbeds. That's definitely the best. I mean, most geology is easier to see on the coast than anywhere else. They're mainly basalt and dolerite, and they're sometimes what's called Feldspatheric. In other words, got nice, great big crystals of feldspar in them. So here's, again, from MLS and Bell, showing you how the dikes start off at the central complex and go all the way across onto the mainland. This is from the this is from the survey memoir. You can see the dikes going running northwest, southeast, across the sun, and into the north of England as well. So they go quite a distance, these things. This is how they're depicted on the North Mull BGS map. They're shown as green. Different maps, different times have different representations. And in the Croghan area, all these little sort of red things there. These are all the dikes. Dozens of the things, hundreds of them in the Croghan area. This is an example of a dike at Staffa and Ulva and how it's affected the ash round about it. This greyish, creamy coloured material is volcanic ash, and it's been baked to a bright red colour by this dike cutting across. That's a dike at Finnefort, which has weathered out like a channel. So it's softer rock and it appears like that. This is a dike near Portfield, and this almost looks man-made. It's almost like a man-made wall of rock. This, I mentioned Feldspatheric dikes. This is what they look like, these great big crystals of feldspar in amongst it. That's a composite dike. The inside is acidic, it's a bit like granite, and the outside margins are basaltic. This is one near Salon, and it's made the colour contrast is quite considerable. It's an impressive looking thing. There are Mull dikes that aren't actually in Mull. This is one on Cumbria. This is called the Lion Rock in Cumbria. It's quite a spectacular looking thing as you go down towards Millport. And this is one near Ardmore Point, which stands up like a wall of rock. Again, fantastic looking thing. Difficult to get to because of all the bracken and brambles and what have you, but it's quite a spectacular thing. And in the area, you've got this columnar basalt as well, just to add to the interest. That's Ben Heant in the distance in Ardmurchan. And this is the famous one at Calgary, the Calgary Pier Dike, which has been used as a wall of this ruined shed down here. So that's one of the most famous. That appears in loads of books and pictures and illustrations and things. The one at Calgary. But I mean, dikes are just everywhere. Just everywhere you go in Mull, you'll find dikes. There's one at Karczyk that bifurcates, actually splits in two. You've got a bit of it going that way and a bit going this way. So they're not always just one continuous thing. There's another one at Karczyk heading straight for a sill. This is a sill, a sort of horizontal, sub-horizontal intrusion. And that's a dike, vertical one heading for it. Here's one near Loch Nakeal in what's called Avin Nahua. And it's this deep, deep channel that goes for quite a distance where the dike has weathered out. It's quite an impressive looking thing, this chasm in the rock, steep parallel sided. And that's a dike that's weathered away. This is the other end of it, looking up. So volcanic plugs are another thing that's important in Mull. There are quite a few of them, especially in North Mull, well described in a paper by Andrew Kerr, which we'll see in the next slide. And these were probably feeder systems for lava flows that have now weathered away. They're usually sometimes quite distinctive features in the landscape. I'll show you a few examples. Sargdabin in North Mull is here. These black splodges are these volcanic plugs. So Sargdabin is between Tobermory and Dervik. It's a good example, easy to get to, and sometimes be quite muddy if you ever go up it. Magnificent viewpoint. The rocks are dolerite, gabbro maybe in places, but coarser. It's got a small loch within it. And it's reckoned to be a feeder for higher up lava flows. It's not a volcano as such. Sometimes it's called that, but it's not really. It's the stump of a worn down volcanic edifice. That's it there, that green splodge on the map. There's also another one, which we'll see, called Knocker, this one here. And there's a few others in the area, but this is Sargdabin here. That's what it looks like, this little rocky hill. And that's the Loch that's in the middle of it. Quite a spectacular place. That's what it looks like in winter. And the view from it, that's looking over towards Ardnamurchan, that's Rum in the distance. So that's a great viewpoint. And this is it seen from the north on a snowy day. So it's quite nice. It stands up as this rocky little hill. Some of the other plugs, there's one called Dunmore near Ulva Ferry, and there's one called Knocker near Tobermory. This is Dunmore, looking over to Ulva. And that's the view from the summit. That's Ulva in the distance. And if you look at Ulva, again, you'll see the lavas are actually dipping slightly. There's a bit of a dip. So they've been disturbed and tipped up a little bit. The heather was really nice this particular day and Dunmore. And this is Knocker in the setting sun. Now that picture hasn't been retouched in any way. That is how it looked with the sun shining on it. Knocker means the Hangman's Hill. So there must be a great story behind that. And it just stands up as this rocky plug of rock. It's easy to get to. It's just off the main Glengorm Road. Finally, we'll look at some glacial features and some coastal pictures. The first one are these things called P-forms at Loch na Keal. Now, P-forms are caused by glaciation. We're up to the sort of the last geological things that are happening, the processes that are happening. So glaciation has left its mark on the landscape. We showed you all these erratic boulders that are covering Mull. But you've also got these things, these P-forms, which are grooves that have been dug out by glaciers by some process which they reckon is hydraulic in nature. It's not simply rock grinding away. There's more to it than that. But these things are these distinctive grooves in the rock. And you see these at Loch na Keal. And these are reckoned to be the best in Britain, these ones. These are some of the best P-forms that you'll find. I mean, there's lots of questions about why do you get them here and you don't get them elsewhere? Why are they concentrated in this area? I'm not sure, don't ask. But they're very distinct feature in the rocks there. You see that, and the direction of them tells you about the way the ice moved. They're all sort of east-west. So we'll finish up with some coastal geomorphology, just some nice pictures of the coast, because the coast has been shaped by ice, it's been shaped by erosion, it's been shaped by landslip, by processes that are continuing to this day. And you get rock falls that will change things. You get all sorts of stuff going. You get sea stacks that will wear down and collapse and all the rest of it. So we'll look at some of these things. And the best place to see this type of thing is in the Greeben Wilderness area and also near Treshnish. There are some tremendous features. So we'll just have a look at these to finish off this talk. This is the coast near Treshnish, and it's got this very, very flat level terrace there. And this is described in the BGS map as a pre-glacial shoreline. This is what the shoreline would have looked like about 30,000 years ago. It's very flat and it's very easy walking along this. And you've got things like this great, it looks like a sphinx, this point of rock, and there's a little natural arch in it down here where it's been eroded away. That's my wife with a dog and a rucksack, in case you're wondering what that is. that white thing. That's me sitting by the natural arch in the rock. It's well eroded. These are lavas, but they're well eroded. That's at Treshnish. It's a great place to go to. It's a really, really nice bit of Mull, and the coastal scenery is fantastic. This is near the wilderness area, and you've got these great sea stacks, these cliffs and sea stacks along here. It's dramatic scenery. Here's one of the sea stacks and lots of caves. That's looking back up towards Greeben here. That's my son standing near the entrance to a cave. That's a stack, a sea stack in the distance. And the cave's got a little window in the roof here, as you see. And again, this was taken on a really frosty day, beginning of the year. It was really, really cold. You can see everything's got this bluish look to it. But that's that sea stack again. Castle Uvan Taggart, it's called, which is the castle of the priest's cave. So there must be a great story there. And there's another sea stack further down the coast. This one's called Stachglas Bunanushka, which is the grey stack at the foot of the water. And sure enough, there's a waterfall running down there. There's a view of it through a natural arch. Really dramatic scenery in this part of the island. It's difficult to get to. It's quite rough going. There's that waterfall again coming down. That's the stream coming down the rocks there towards that sea stack. And there's great clefts in the rock here. I mean, it's very broken country. And yes, the path does go close to the cliff edge like that. So it's not a place if you've got vertigo, to be honest. Most of these rocks here are the Moines Metamorphics. And I think they've been subjected to a lot of shattering, a lot of faulting, and there's been something going on to create all this. It really is broken up. There's the waterfall coming down, and there's that sea stack again. And there's a cave gradually being eroded out into the rocks. These are the Moines Rocks, dipping about 45 degrees. It's like that most of the way down that coast. You've got veins of quartz and whatever running through it. That's McKinnon's Cave. That's the famous McKinnon's Cave, which you can only really get to at low tide. I think a sort of half falling tide is okay, but if ever I go there, I always make sure that I'm going there on a low tide. Most of the rocks round about are the Moines Metamorphics. I think there must be a fault or something that's shattered the rock, and that's caused the cave to form. But it's an amazingly deep cave, and when you get in there, the previous times I've been in there, it's been complete and utter silence. You don't hear dripping water, you don't hear seabirds, you don't hear the sea. It's just total silence in there. It's an amazing place, because silence is such a difficult thing to find nowadays. If you want to get it, try McKinnon's Cave. That's the view. That picture on the right is the view inside the cave looking out. And that picture on the left is a waterfall near McKinnon's Cave. There's lots of waterfalls off the cliffs there. So it's dramatic scenery. It's well worth a visit. But it's rough going. It's not an easy walk, has to be said. Final points, just to finish off. The next Thursday, there's a lighthouse path walk and a beach pebble event. There's another geology walk and beach pebble event, Iona, on the 23rd of September. 30th of September, I've got another online talk. I'll be talking about columnar basalt, so you'll be able to see more pretty pictures of columns. And there's a short geology walk and a beach pebble event at Mingery Pier over in Ardmurchan on the 7th of October. That's handy for people from Mull as well, because you can just get the ferry. It's just off the ferry where the ferry slipway is. So further details on the SGT website, which the address is there. And that is Mull Rocks. Thank you.